All right, we are back with another episode. Welcome to another episode of what I call this, becoming a techno wizard, and the series on learning about anarchy. I should probably figure out another name for this specific series. Maybe becoming an anarchist, becoming a techno wizard anarchist, the techno wizardry of anarchism. I don't know, messing around with different brands and all that stuff. But let me go ahead and share this across my Discord. Um, and then just go ahead and get started. But if you recall, we left off talking about how will decisions be made in an anarchist community where people, um, are anarchists, like it don't have rulers. Uh, they pointed out a lot of things. All right, it was a very long chapter, but they went into a number of different examples of these anarchist communities and how they use things like consensus, different types of uh, alliances, different types of kind of government, oh goodness, excuse me, systems with people, between different communities of people, rather, to facilitate decisions. But a lot of them tend to be like some sort of assemblies, general councils, but in essence is mostly, democracy or direct democracy or representative democracy, but in a way that is actually, meaningful, as in like not how we do it today, where you have this electoral college crap, but you directly vote for who you want to speak for you, and if they don't, you know, carry out what you all agreed upon, um, then you kick them out the door, right? It's not a matter of them making a career out of politicking. So I found that very very insightful. And if anything, the idea. Oh, one second. Interested. Boom. Okay. Um, but yeah, the idea that we even need a or have a politician class is, I think, a huge indicator of the problem of our current society, right? Of our so-called democracy. The fact that we have a politician class, just think about that. Because I've been learning about politics, right? And the whole because I was one of the people that's like, oh, I don't care about politics. Politics is stupid. Don't bring politics into this and all this other stuff. As I've been actually researching and learning what politics is, I've realized that politics has been grossly, grossly just destroyed, like corrupted. Not just the idea, not just like as we usually think of politicians being corrupt or anything like that. But I'm talking about the word itself. Like politics literally just means a system of government between people. Like it's just a way. It's just how we govern. So literally any decisions like in your family, in your organization, your company or your school or whatever. All of these are technically politics, right? It's just how you communicate, how we make decisions between people, and it's a good thing, right? It's the fact that we have politics, that we have this ability to communicate to one another in order to make mutual decisions and things like that. That is a good thing. We should have more politics. The problem is not the politics. The problem is the fact that we have people whose sole job is to facilitate all politicking, right? As if we've essentially outsourced our decision making power. We've given up our decision making power to people who are career politicians, who that's only thing they do is basically to use our power, to take our power to make decisions, and basically monopolize that between themselves. And we think that's okay. We say, oh, that's just representative democracy. Oh, that's just democracy, and that's just whatever, right? But no, that's not. That's not okay. If we want democracy, then we should have something like what they're showing here with these general councils. Is like when you vote for somebody, you're not voting for that person. Not really. What you're voting is, number one, the decisions that you want to make, like if you want to spend more of the collective funding on a certain things like community gardens or infrastructure or this, that, and the other, right? Um, versus if you want to, well, we'll just keep it simple there, right? So if you want to, number one, make decisions, and then number two, ensure somebody is advocating for that decision, is accountable for that decision. Then you use this councilship, um, this person that you voted in, right, in order to facilitate, or not really facilitate, but to be accountable, right, for that decision to be actually done. And the importance there is that what you're voting for is a leader, not necessarily a person. What that means is a leader is a type of person who takes it as a momentary thing, right? Their goal, their mission is to accomplish what you've decided. You've already decided. You as in the people, as in, this group of people decided. Okay, we want this to happen, and so that leader says, okay, you want this to happen. All right, then I have to go to this other group and see what they want, or you communicate with all the other groups to see how you can make it happen. And that person, their job is just to take what your group decided, to communicate that with all these other groups and make that happen. Right? Their job is not to facilitate all communications between all different types of decisions, because each type of decision might need a different leader. Right? Each season might have a different leader. Each, whatever. Like all of this, it should be temporary. It should be based on these momentary needs and things like that. The ability to have these lifelong kind of positions for the sole job of politicking, I think is very problematic. And I might be having that wrong. I might have described much of that wrong. But that's what I'm learning about so far. So we'll see. So, anyways, let's continue, or let's begin. How will decisions be enforced? The state has so thoroughly obscured the fact that people are capable of implementing their own decisions. Look at that. I literally did not read this. I did not read this, okay? Exactly what I was saying, though. Anyway, that their own decisions, that those raised in this society are hard pressed to imagine how this could be done without giving a small minority the authority to coerce the people coerce people into following orders. That's right. Like, beautifully said. Let's say that again. I'm sorry. I know we just started, but this is great. The state has so thoroughly obscured the fact that people are capable of implementing their own decisions that those raised in this society are hard pressed to imagine how this could be done without giving a small minority the authority to coerce people into following orders. On the contrary, the power to enforce decisions should be every bit as universal and decentralized as the power to make those decisions. Ooh. There have been stateless societies on every continent that use a few sanctions rather than specialized enforcers. Only through a long and violent process do states steal this ability from people and monopolize it as their own. Hold up, actually, so I did get a new mic, but I'm not sure if it automatically selected that mic. Let me check, because that would suck. It just says default, so hopefully it's been using this mic. I guess you'll see now. Whoopsie. Let's continue. On the contrary, the power to enforce decisions, I'm just going to say it again, should be every bit as universal and decentralized as the power to make those decisions. There have been stateless societies on every continent that used a few sanctions rather than specialized enforcers. Only through a long and violent process do states steal this ability from people and monopolize it as their own. This is how diffuse sanctions work. In an ongoing process, a society decides how it wants to organize and what behaviors it considers unacceptable. This may occur over time or in formal, immediate settings. The participation of everybody in making these decisions is complemented by the participation of everybody in upholding them. If somebody breaks these common standards, everyone is accustomed to reacting. They don't call the police, file a grievance, or wait for someone else to do something. They approach the person they think is in the wrong and tell him or take another appropriate action. Mm. For example, the people in a neighborhood may decide that each different household will take turns cleaning the street. If one household fails to uphold this decision, everybody else on the block has the ability to ask them to fulfill their responsibility. Depending on how serious the transgression is, other people in the neighborhood might react with criticism, ridicule, or ostracism. If the household has a good excuse for being slack, perhaps someone living there is very sick and the others are busy taking care of her, the neighbors can choose to have sympathy and forgive their lapse. This flexibility and sensitivity are typically lacking in a law-based system. Exactly. On the other hand, if the negligent household has no excuse, and not only do they never clean the streets, they throw their trash in it, their neighbors might hold a general meeting demanding a change in their behavior, or they might take some action like piling all the trash in front of their door. Meanwhile, in their day-to-day interactions, individual neighbors might share their criticisms with members of the offending household, or ridicule them, not invite them to joint activities, or glare at them in the streets. If someone is incorrigibly antisocial, always blocking or contradicting the desires of the rest of the group and refusing to respond to people's concerns, the ultimate response is to kick that person out of the group. This is super powerful, incredibly so. I was talking about this several times in my podcast because it seriously is something that we deeply, deeply need and just completely ignore and dismiss, right? The idea and the realization that social behavior, that us being pro social creatures, is the best way to manage behavior, right? What that means is that when somebody does something bad or undesirable, right, for the community, you don't have to throw the book at them, right? You don't have to throw a law at them. You don't have to throw the police at them. And most of our everyday lives, right, we figure out these problems. We manage these situations through just regular social relationships. If your sibling, especially if you're a close sibling and not, it's not an abusive relationship, but if your sibling is, you know, doing something that you don't like, you go and talk to them like, hey, I didn't like that. You be a mature person. You be like, okay, can we not do this? Or if they're, you had an agreement to see who's going to do the dishes when, hey, you didn't, do the dishes. I thought you was going to do it, right? You talk to them. You figure out what's going on. And most people, right? Most healthy people, that's all they need. Because on occasion people forget or or they're busy or whatever, right? And so just talking to them solves most problems. The idea that we need police and laws and other stuff like this only is functional on the idea that humans are inherently evil or bad or something like that, right? And it's really silly of an idea because people would say, oh, what if somebody, is, like I said, what if somebody does something really bad? Like, what if they don't, take out the trash ever, right? Then you have to realize that this is not a normal person. Most people will agree to what the group wanted. That's just what most people do. Like, if you want to call it, rule followers or herd behavior, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. It's pro-social. It's like just natural behavior. When somebody repeatedly is antisocial, that's actually a sign that this person has some sort of disorder or some sort of depression or some sort of problem, right? And then you can figure out what that is. You can figure out if it's, like they said, if somebody is sick, or or if they're depressed, or if they're angry for some reason, right? And then by having that communication, you can have a more ethical, more empathetic, and a more efficient system. Because when you just say, "Oh, they're not doing it," throw them in jail or whatever, give them a fine, then it often makes them more antisocial. And what's killer too, is that people are break laws all the time. Like, we have laws. Laws don't stop bad people from doing bad things. All it does is punish people for doing bad things after the fact. And those punishments are rarely ever
effective to stop them from doing it again. This is why, jail and prison and what you call it, I forgot the word, but for going back to jail is such a high rate because it's ineffective. Like the system we have now is completely inefficient. Most people will agree. Most sensible people who look at the data and care about people, will probably agree. So this whole idea that we need laws and enforcers and all this other stuff is just inherently flawed and extremely silly. Because, like I said, if you're worried about bad people are going to do the wrong thing anyways. Even if you have a law against it, they're still going to do it. They're still going to break the law. Like it, it's much better to figure out why they're doing that thing. All right, and if they're really serious, you kick them out or get them help. But anyways, this method is much more flexible and more liberating. Yep. Than legalitarian coercive approaches. Rather than being bound to the blind letter of the law, which cannot take into account specific circumstances or people's needs, and depending on a powerful minority for enforcement, the method of diffuse sanctions allows everyone to weigh for herself how serious the transgression is. It also allows transgressors the opportunity to convince others that their actions were justified, thus providing constant challenges to the dominant morality. By contrast, in a statist system, the authorities don't have to show us that something is right or wrong before condemning someone's home or confiscating a drug deemed illegal. All they have to do is cite a statute in a law book that their victims had no hand in writing. Yeah, that's deeply problematic because another reason this is super messed up is because a lot of times people don't even know all the laws. Like they don't know what's legal, and 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 at least here in America, it doesn't matter. If it doesn't matter if you didn't know it was illegal, they will still throw the book at you and punish you for it, and it's really really unfortunate. And it really depends on like your lawyer, right? How much money you can pay for somebody to fight for your case of if you're going to have some leniency and stuff like that, or it depends on the whims of the judge or the whims of the jury or stuff like that. It's kind of silly, and again super inefficient. In a horizontal society, people enforce decisions according to how enthusiastic they are about those decisions. If almost everybody strongly supports a decision, it will be upheld vigorously. Whereas if a decision leaves most people feeling neutral or unenthusiastic, it will only be partially enforced, leaving open more room for creative transgression and exploring other solutions. On the other hand, a lack of enthusiasm in implementing decisions might mean that in practice, organizations fall on the shoulder. Organization falls on the shoulder of informal power holders, people who are delegated an unofficial position of leadership by the rest of the group, whether they want it or not. This means that members of horizontal groups, from collective houses to entire societies, must confront the problem of self discipline. They must hold themselves accountable to the standards they have agreed upon and the criticism of their peers. That's super powerful, pro social. And risk being unpopular or confronting conflict by criticizing those who do not uphold common standards, calling out the housemate who does not do dishes or the community that does not contribute to road maintenance. It's a difficult process, often lacking in many current anarchist projects, but without it, group decision making is a facade, and responsibility is vague and unequally shared. Going through this process, people become more empowered and more connected with those around them. Yeah, definitely, definitely, that's huge. I'm not sure if you can hear me drinking now with this new mic. I was gonna say something about that. Yeah, this self-discipline aspect. A huge another problem of having politicians or enforcers or whatever be their own kind of class of citizen is again accountability, right? Because if they do something wrong, right, or if they don't follow what people agreed to or what people wanted them to do, they don't really have much accountability. There's no real accountability, right? People claim, oh, you just vote them out. Oh, you could just, reform. Like, what's that gonna do? It takes years for most reforms to even happen. It takes years for voting out to happen, And meanwhile, they're just sitting around making a whole bunch of money, or just being around their own people. Never really facing the consequences for their decisions or for their lack of decisions. And it just makes no sense. Literally, there is no disincentive. There is no accountability. So why would they change? Why would they listen? Why would they actually care? It's just really ridiculous that we set the system up, and we call it, a good thing, or like it's the best thing ever. Like it's really messed up. Yes, it is better than monarchy and stuff like that to some extent, but we need to do way better. Groups always contain the possibility for conformity and conflict. Authoritarian groups typically avoid conflict by enforcing greater levels of conformity. Pressures to conform also exist in anarchist groups, but without restrictions on human movement, it is easier for people to leave and join other groups, or to act or live on their own. Thus, people. Oh goodness, excuse me. Thus, people can choose the levels of conformity and conflict they want to tolerate. And in the process of finding and leaving groups, people change and challenge social norms. That's a huge part, right? I say that all the time. That people say, "Oh, you could just leave if you don't like it here." You can't. It's extremely difficult to leave. All right, you have all this stuff here in the first place, and then second of all, you need all these, visas or this, that, and the other in order to move to another place. Then you still got to pay taxes back here. For most of the time, it's really difficult to stop paying taxes here. Like it's not easy to just move if you don't like how the rules are. And again, it's the fact that the entire nation is being coerced. The entire nation is forced to for this level of conformities. The different rules per states barely are negligible in the grand scheme of things. Imagine if you had I want I want to say almost radically different communities in fairly close proximity to each other, like within the same city or within the same state. That you have a number of different communities, dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands of different, like actually different types of communities, each with their own decision making and stuff like that. So if you disagree with how one of those people are doing things in any one of those communities, then you can leave, because there's literally a whole bunch of choices. Choice is freedom. Choice is the thing that makes liberty, right? It's what makes it important. If we don't have choice, then we don't actually have liberty. We don't have freedom. So to say, oh, you could just leave, it's to say we have freedom here in America is completely like idiotic. We don't have any choice. We don't have anywhere else to go. We don't have any other way we can do this. So it's really silly to say that. Uria, I'm sorry if I'm not mispronounce your name. Hammock said the best stream hands down. Oh, thanks so much. I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching and commenting. Feel free to you know share your own ideas or questions or anything like that. We're happy to turn this into a discussion. But let's continue. In the newly created state of Israel, Jews who had participated in socialist movements in Europe took the opportunity to create hundreds of kibbutzim, utopian communal farms. In these farms, the members created a strong example of communal living and decision making. At a typical kibbutz, most decisions were made at a general town meeting held twice weekly. The frequency and length of meetings stemmed from the fact that so many aspects of social life were open to debate, and the common belief that proper decisions can only be made after intensive group discussion. These were about a dozen elected positions in the kibbutz, or there were about a dozen elected positions, related to managing the commune's financial affairs and coordinating production and trade. But the general policy had to be decided in general meetings. Official positions were limited to terms of a few years, and the members encouraged a culture of office hating, a reluctance to take office, and a disdain for those who appeared to be power hungry. Yes, that's always a good thing, right? That's reverse dominance tactics, the ability to kind of preemptively kind of shut down egomania and narcissism, right? The fact that we, again, this is pure, this is data. We all know this. Is like our current positions of power, whether it's politics, uh, governments, even nonprofits, even freaking little community towns. The reason they're so kind of toxic is that they're cesspools for people who want more power, for people who want, to have their ego stroked. Um, and because we think, oh yeah, they want power, that's a good thing. They're ambitious, yes, yeah, right. And we say, oh yeah, so we basically give them all these awards and prizes and praise for taking positions of power and not really hold them up to much accountability. So it's literally we're literally incentivizing people to be more narcissistic in our current society versus something like this office hating. These are reverse dominance tactics that makes people realize that taking a leadership position is only necessary but not something that you want to do. So it inherently makes people less likely to be egocentric, right? Because if people see you're happy to take this position, and people are like, oh, what you doing? Like, this is not a it's not a thing. Like, it's it's just a healthy thing right there, and I'm really sad that we don't do this anymore. No one in the kibbutz had coercive authority. Neither were there police in the kibbutz, though it was common for everyone to leave their doors unlocked. That's when you know you're in a good neighborhood, right? Public opinion was the most important factor ensuring social cohesion. If there was a problem with a member of the commune, it was discussed at the general meeting. But most of the time, even the threat of it being brought up at the general meeting motivated people to work out their differences. In the worst case scenario, if a member refused to accept group decisions, the rest of the collective could vote to kick her out. But this ultimate sanction differs from the coercive tactics used by the state in a key respect. Voluntary groups only exist because everyone involved wants to work with everyone else. Voluntary association. Voluntary association. If we can actually choose what nation to be in, what country to be in, what city to be in, what politics to believe in, then you're more likely to be more involved and you actually once again have a choice, right? Because you chose to be a part of that community. You weren't just born there by default. Like we this idea that we are born citizens, it sounds like a good thing. It sounds like, oh yeah, you're born here, boom, you have the same privileges as everyone else. But what that really means is birthplace indoctrination. What that really means is that you don't have a choice of whether or not you should believe in the American ideas or that of any other country. The fact that you don't have a choice means that you don't have the freedom. If you have the ability to actually choose, hey, I want to be an American. I like the American ideas. I'm going to be an American. Then you're going to believe in it more, right? You're going to do more for it. But if you don't, then you're just going to like, I was born, like, you're not going to really value it, as they say. So yeah, voluntary association is huge. A person who is excluded is not deprived of the ability to survive or maintain relationships, as there are many other groups she can join. Yeah. More importantly, she is not forced to abide by collective decisions. In a society based on this principle, people would enjoy a social mobility that is denied to people in status contexts. Yep. We claim all the time, we have social mobility, but the facts don't show it. Here in America, I mean, especially here in Atlanta, I think it's what 80 or even 90% of people um, born in the city in a certain socioeconomic status die in the same socioeconomic status. That goes for people born in poverty as well as people born in middle class or something like that. So if you are likely born either impoverished or middle class or even rich, it's very likely that you will die in the same status, right? So social mobility is another one of those illusions in which laws are enforced upon an individual whether she approves of them or not. In any case, expulsion was not common in the kibbutzim because public opinion and group discussion were sufficient to solve most conflicts. But the kibbutzim had other problems, which can teach us important lessons about creating collectives. After about a decade, the kibbutzim began to succumb to the pressures of the capitalistic world that surrounded them. Although internally the kibbutzim were strikingly communal, they were never properly anti-capitalist. From the beginning, they attempted to exist as competitive producers within a capitalist economy. They need to compete in the economy and thus to industrialize, encouraged a greater the need, sorry, the need to compete in the economy and thus to industrialize, encouraged a greater reliance on experts, while influence from the rest of the society fostered consumerism. Yeah, that's another thing. Like once again, and again, it's it's so weird because just a few years ago, just a few months ago, I was a person that's like capitalism might be the answer. All we got to do is just fix capitalism, right? Or we just change this, change that, and we're good to go, right? It's a great system, We just got to fix a few things. But the more I learn about capitalism, not just from anarchists, but from capitalists themselves, like people who love capitalism, the more I learn about it, the more I realize it's inherently flawed. Like the whole point of capitalism is to privatize things, right? And that sounds like a good thing once again, but when you take away the public, the commons, right, the ability for people to come together and share resources and all this other stuff, and come into a melting pot, then you decrease this social ability of humans, what we're evolved to do, to be social, to share, and all this other stuff. When you try to privatize everything from random resources in nature to ideas through intellectual property, to software to anything else, right? It actually makes less innovation. And again, this is we can see you can look up the data on it. Um, there was more innovation before there was so much patents and copyrights and stuff like that out there. Innovation has actually dropped down in the last couple years, the last couple of decades, since privatization has gone up. And you can see this in the realm of open sourcing, where in adversarial interoperability, look up Cory Doctorow, where um, before much of the internet was created, much of the innovations of the internet was created by open source organizations, coming together to create different things. But then these different private companies would take something from the open source and then privatize it, turn it into their own IP, which killed those open source projects and relegated all the innovation to those specific companies and made it difficult for everybody else to innovate and keep changing things. So the fundamental idea of capitalism, unfortunately, is inherently flawed, um, and people unfortunately make the mistake that of thinking that marketplaces are synonymous with capitalism, but marketplaces predate capitalism. We've always had market, we've always had trade, and we will always have markets and trade. But capitalism is just one way to do it, and it's a really bad way of doing it. So yeah, this is a important paragraph here. Going off on tangents, sorry. At the same time, there is a negative reaction to the lack of privacy intentionally structured in the kibbutz. Common showers, for example. Yeah, I don't think that's necessary. The purpose of this lack of privacy was to engineer a more communal spirit, but because the designers of the kibbutz did not realize that privacy is as important to people's well-being as social connectedness, kibbutz members began to feel stifled over time, or stifled, either way, and withdraw from the public life of the kibbutz, including their participation in decision making. Yeah, that's one of the things that is super interesting. Privacy doesn't seem like it's a very nebulous thing, right? Like we all kind of value our privacy, but most people don't really know why. Like we say, oh, it's private, right? But when you get down to like why is it, why don't you want to share or whatever, and most people can't really articulate it. It's like, I don't know, because I feel like it. Right? It's hard to it's one of those things that's hard to articulate, but it's extremely important. And I think it comes down to choice once again, that freedom, that ability to say, I'm gonna keep this to myself. I'm not gonna share this. And that's okay, right? That's okay if you have that choice, that option. That is not that is default or whatever, but that you actually have the choice, and it's a meaningful choice to say, okay, no, I'm not gonna shower out in the open today. I'm gonna shower, by myself at home. I think people, if people actually had the choice to shower wherever they want, or to do anything that's privacy based, then they choose, hey, I want to share this, I want to, do it in a communal area, whatever, then appreciate, we can better appreciate, number one, things for what they are, and number two, the social process, right? The social behavior, the social aspect of things. So, for instance, the showering. If we can shower by ourselves, and we can do that all the time, if we have the option to shower together with other people, then people will do it. Like, oh yeah, that sounds fun. Like a little public bathhouse, that might be a little cool thing to do. But if that's the only choice, then you're like, sometimes you just want to go for yourself, and then you start feeling like, oh, I have to share everything. I don't have anything for myself. Maybe that's the thing too. Like, because you don't have those choices, those options, you don't get to understand who you are as an individual, right? And that's another thing about this, that I like about anarchy, is that it balances individuality with collectivism, with socializing. It balances the realization that we are individuals, but we are also social creatures. And so we need both. We need to be able to express this individuality and do things on our own and all this other stuff, have our own liberty and equality, at the same time as have a collective social approach, believe in something bigger, be a part of something bigger, communicate with other folks in the group, all this other stuff. We need both of these things. But in our society today, especially with capitalism, it makes it seem like, oh no, everything should be private, everything should be individualistic, right? And it completely ignores the value of the social behaviors and mechanisms and aspects of our society, unless it could be capitalized on and profited upon. So yeah, it's very interesting. Another vital lesson. Did I just read this? Oh no, okay. Another vital lesson of the kibbutzim is that building utopian collectives must involve tireless struggle against contemporary authoritarian structures. Yeah. Or they will become part of those structures. The kibbutzim were founded on land seized by the Israeli state from Palestinians. Yeah, that's not good. Against whom genocidal policies are still continuing today. The racism of the European founders allowed them to ignore the abuse inflicted on the previous inhabitants of what they saw as a promised land, much the same way religious pilgrims in North America plundered the indigenous to construct their new society. The Israeli state gained incredibly from the fact that nearly all of their potential dissidents, including socialists and veterans of armed struggles against Nazism and colonialism, voluntarily sequestered themselves in escapist communes that contributed to the capitalist economy. If these utopians had used the kibbutz as a base to struggle against capitalism and colonialism in solidarity with the Palestinians while constructing the foundations of a communal society, history in the Middle East might have turned out differently. That's another great aspect. Um, yeah, we'll end it there. But yeah, that's great to end it on because um, once again, like we need these collectives, we need these abilities to come together, right? And to wrap that up with like the reverse dominance mechanisms. I've been learning a lot about hunter-gatherer cultures and other anthropology, archaeology, stuff like that. And what we learned throughout history is that many societies practiced, like, had to consciously create an egalitarian society. It's not automatic, but neither is an authoritarian society, right? That's not automatic either. Both of them require different incentives and different environments to foster that sort of culture and that sort of behavior. So whether you want to be authoritarian or you want to be egalitarian, you have to create the incentives and the structure for that sort of system to thrive. And today we've created a structure, a system where authoritarian, hierarchical systems thrive, and egalitarian is really difficult to establish. And so, if we want to create these more equality-based, liberty-based societies, we have to structure that, right? We have to support that. We have to have the incentives and the environmental structure behind that to support that sort of thing. So yeah, it's always important to realize. And this was great. This was great. As always, that'll be it for me, for today at least. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts on this, what you learned, what you gained from this, your own ideas, if you disagree, why you think you disagree, and all this other stuff. And then we go off from there. And